I've just been reading through again your pieces on Joker this morning, which
Uh-huh.
I really enjoyed, and I thought that would be quite a fun place to start for our conversation.
Great.
Getting
And I had thought the same thing. I was thinking about that this morning, and I was wondering if you're going to bring that up. And I thought that also might be a good place to
hmm,
riff.
excellent. Yeah, it's cool. I remember when I first saw that movie, and I was like, okay, this is cool. It feels like a lot of the themes that those of us who are thinking about philosophy, spirituality, and culture all of a sudden appeared in a pop culture movie for the
Hmm.
first time, perhaps. And what I liked in one of the pieces you wrote was about how this perhaps represents the death of the superhero narrative, that
Hmm.
simplistic good and evil. Evil is this thing that kind of appears from without, and then the goodies show up and have a battle with it and maybe take some damage, but then defeat it, and that's the end. Where Joker situates us much more in a sense that evil is within all of us, and we're all sort of responsible for it, especially if we just let it come out and don't do anything about it.
Yeah. And it's more than that, actually. It's, well, the death of the superhero narrative. It's also the death of postmodernism, right? I've been thinking. And postmodernism doesn't leave you anywhere, right? It leaves you with, an infinite regress, or, you have this total freedom, but you have absolutely no parameters, you know? So I think that the death of the superhero, or the superhero fatigue thing, it's an expression of postmodernism. Does that make sense?
Mm.
It's an
Mm.
expression of the death of grand narratives,
And what?
and being in this liminal in between space. And this is sort of, I guess, Jordan Hall language. I don't have you had Jordan Hall on your podcast? Uh,
No, in fact, I reached out to him a couple of times, but didn't
Yeah,
manage to get through to him. I'd love to speak to him.
yeah. Well, he's always talking about the liminal space, and I think the liminal space is this place. I think Heidegger put it best. He says we're too late for gods and too early for being. Does that ring? Does that make any sense? We're like the period of the gods is kind of over, right? And we're in this in between chaos space, and we don't know what's next. And
Mm.
and 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 then the Joker arrives in that moment as a warning and also a possibility.
Yes, and it's interesting. He is a warning about what awaits us in this landscape where we don't know what to aim for, but
Hmm.
we have the possibility of simulating, what would I say, prestige through getting attention.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's the monster of attention in a way, right?
Mm.
He's the person who's you know uh, the most marginal, abandoned character in society, and his realization is that he can gain power through attention. Okay, even though there's no actual positive narrative behind his power, it's just power for the sake of power, and it's the positive embrace of nihilism or nihilism. I don't never know how to call it, because in France we say nihilism. I live in France, and so it's the positive embrace of nihilism, right?
Mm.
And we spoke about this transition from the zombie, right? I got this sort of train of thought from John Vervaeke, and he was suggesting that maybe the zombie mythos, which is pure nihilism, 100% nihilism, there's just no meaning if you're a zombie, right? To the Joker, which is the positive embrace of nihilism. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think there's a line that you put it quite nicely as well, that the zombie is is freedom but devoid of any responsibility for things. The
Right.
zombie is free to mindlessly roam and devour devour consciousness as well. Where
Mm-hmm.
then the shift with Joker, it's like the zombie wakes up and discovers this agency it has without actually realizing any of its need to take responsibility. So it's just chaotic consumption, destruction, and that knows how powerful it is and can scheme.
Right. Because we're all very powerful, right? We're all very powerful. We all have a lot of more agency than we think. And we can use that, to generate, positive, generative consequences. Or we can go down the dark path of resentment, bitterness, gleeful. I like the word glee because the Joker is a gleeful person. He's enjoying himself, as he's tearing apart society. He likes it. He thinks that it gives him a feeling of elan or joy to destroy something.
There's something the darkly comedic, and I'm thinking that sometimes, I mean, the benefit of comedy done right is that it breaks us out of our narrow box thinking and getting wrapped up in how serious and important everything is. Sometimes when life is getting overwhelming or you're losing sight of things, you can just laugh and go, oh my God, it's all kind of absurd, isn't it? And have a bit of a laugh and relax. But then Joker seems to take that, and it's still that mentality of this is all absurd, but it loses the sense of like, okay, let's mock the thing we're doing while still doing it, and just become, let's mock it completely. It's so absurd. We might as well just revel in the absurdity.
Yeah. And on one level, the Joker, there's a logic to the Joker, right? He's right. Existence is absurd. It is violent. It is like, the Red Queen in Alice in Wonderland that's just off with your head. She's just, that's just, you look at existence and you can look at that and you can say that it's actually surprising that we don't fall into that, right? That we somehow are on a thread of meaning still. That we're still following a thread of meaning, that we still have meaning in our lives, that we don't just degenerate into that state. So that's the fragile sort of humanity that still remains within us, and the Joker, he goes over that line, and so it's a cautionary tale of what happens when you go over the line, and I think in a way that's the danger that we're facing in the future is individuals just going over the line, right? And then finding themselves with incredible power to attract attention, and then starting a cult or an ISIS-like cult, or it could be something that appears more benevolent but actually has a darkness in it, and just not losing the thread, the golden thread of meaning, you could call it.
The word attention is hanging in my mind now, and I'm thinking of it I think it's Latin root, which literally means about thinning. Tenuo is like thinning down and focusing, which again is something like meaning, finding that thread of meaning amidst the chaos. And you can also, I suppose, think about that through the lens of, John Vervaeke's thought around relevance realization. Where am I going with this? It's attention is key, and I suppose perhaps the issue in this postmodern informational world we live in, it's like, what the fuck do you pay attention to? And
John Vervaeke calls that a combinatorial explosion. I think it's like there's so many options, there's so many channels, and it just reduces itself absurdly. So everyone is an option, everyone is a channel, any reality is a possibility. Where do I live? Where am I right now? I live in France. I'm talking to you in English, and you're in London, and you have your networks and friends, and I have mine, and we don't really know where we are or where we're going, in some sense, right? And so it would be very easy to get lost in that infinite sea of possibility. So freedom, right? Freedom is not freedom, because if you have unlimited freedom, you're completely imprisoned by a possibility. And that's the problem with the Joker, right? He has unlimited, in a way, he realizes he has unlimited options. He can do whatever he wants. He's gone beyond good or evil. And so his freedom becomes this, because I guess this is sort of the Jordan Petersonian insight, right? Is that unlimited freedom is what we've been aiming for. And now in a way, we have quite a lot of freedom. Right? We have a lot of freedom, but what's next if you have unlimited freedom, and then you have to sort of build the world from that. Are you following, or am I rambling here too much?
No, I'm following.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, there's this interesting saying that I've heard. Do you know Jocko Willink, the badass US Navy SEAL?
Sure. Yeah.
And one of his sayings is discipline equals freedom.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Submitting yourself to the discipline, which is hard and grueling, and sometimes you don't want to do it, that actually enables a higher sort of freedom. There's sort of tier 1 freedom, which is just do everything. Mm-hmm. And then there's tier 2 freedom, which is a freedom that is enabled by a sacrifice of a bunch of this freedom.
Exactly. Yeah. What are you going to sacrifice? Yeah. So if you want to be free in some way in your life, what are you going to sacrifice for that freedom? And if you don't have this notion of sacrifices, if you have this notion of giving up, you just want to acquire more and more stuff or information or experience, but then you end up kind of crazy, I think, because you haven't come down to the earth. You haven't come down to because the earth, you need to sort of have I am rambling a bit here, but I think you need to have a constructive notion of your life on some level. You have to ground yourself in basic elemental realities.
Are you thinking here of Heidegger when he talks about coming to terms with your own, I suppose, mortality? I haven't read Heidegger, but I feel like that's one of the themes.
Yeah, being in time, right? So the fact that that your life, there's a limitation in your life, right? That your life you have a limitation. The limitation is you have a certain amount of years, right? And then, so you're aware of the fact that you're mortal, you're going to die. This creates the value of life. This creates the luminosity of the sort of transparency and numinosity of life in that it's always moving into cycles of living and dying, and the fact that the awareness of death. I mean, I've read Heidegger, but I'm not sure if I'm understanding him at the most nuanced level, but the understanding of death on some level is what opens up the sort of infinitude of meaning and beauty within life. That's kind of what I get from Heidegger. And that there's not a fixed sort of stopping point. There's no, even when you talk about concepts and ideas, Heidegger's idea of an idea is not a fixed concept. It has no parameter around it. It's, you deepen and you deepen and you deepen your understanding of something, and it reveals something new each time. So you don't get stuck anywhere in a concept or a notion of what reality is.
Right. And that, speaking about depth, makes me think again about what we're talking about just freedom, and especially freedom as is enabled when consumer culture where you have
Mm.
everything on a shelf, or at least theoretically everything on a shelf, but the depth you can't get on a shelf, because the
Yeah.
depth comes through just time, I suppose. Time is what gives depth to experience.
And reveals things to you that you need to know about yourself. I was thinking about this in terms of the word apocalypse, which means to reveal, right? We have a kind of corny or cheesy version of what the word apocalypse means, but it actually means something like to uncover or to reveal. And so we all kind of go through our own personal apocalypse, and we see the world fall apart around us, and then we see what is revealed.
Yeah, it's interesting me thinking that I feel like in some sense I've gone through a bit of that in my own life in maybe the last year or so, which I could say perhaps is a move from being very much like a young man filled with just fantasies about what could be, to actually putting some things into action and being like, okay, shit, this takes a lot of time and investment. And even I think doing the podcast, which has been getting me to meet guys like yourself who are older and a lot wiser and a lot more experienced, it's like, okay, shit, you can't fake it.
Yeah.
I was 23 with a fantasy about being like the wisest guy ever by the time I was 25, and it's like, no, that just doesn't work that way.
Well, we could talk about the Joker. If we're still on the thread of the Joker, and we could talk about the Joker in terms of young men, because that's an interesting subject for me, because I'm a teacher. I teach at these kind of engineering universities. So my background is more in literature and more in the arts. But since I've lived in Paris, I've been working at sort of engineers and business schools, and they're often young men, right? And what you're saying, I think, is a common feeling for young guys, like and I think I think what's missing is having people who are older than them to look up to in some certain sense, and to also to have these kind of conversations with. So it's great to have intergenerational conversations. And it's also somehow in an age of egalitarianism, everybody's supposed to be equal, and we are equal, right? I think, as souls, but there is also, when I was younger, I had a lot of heroes, and it was important to have heroes. It was important to have people that you admire and respect and look up to and model yourself on, constantly, right? And sometimes when I talk to my students, I'm very surprised that they don't have heroes, or that they don't have people that they kind of worship in a religious sense, in a quasi-religious sense, And I always feel that this quality of worship is what actually makes you more you, right? Rather than just trying to be myself, which is how we kind of think of it. We kind of think of it in a very individualistic way. Like, I got to be more myself. I want to be myself. I want to be, and so we end up into the solipsistic kind of narcissism, which is the Joker again, right? He's the malevolent narcissist, right? He's the guy who's just, he's trying to, in the beginning, he wants to make everybody happy. He wants to make children smile and laugh but he's lost in his own world. He has no father and no mother. He's fatherless and motherless, right? He died. So there's no, when you talk about depth always has I wouldn't say hierarchy in the sense of authority. I would say hierarchy in the sense of depth, if that makes any sense.
And I think what I was thinking when you were talking about those, say, relationships with heroes, is about a kind of intimacy with someone or something, but probably someone who is more than where you are now, but holds the prospect of you maybe being there one day.
Yeah,
and establishing
exactly.
that personal connection with it is perhaps a key part of development. And if that isn't there, then there's only the option left for intimacy with
Your peers.
oneself or those who are immediately around you.
Yeah, exactly. And and it works on all levels, right? So I'm 48 years old. You're in your late 20s, is that right?
I'm 24.
24, young 20s. Okay, so yeah, you're a precocious 24-year-old, and I'm a bit older than you, and then I still at age 48 look to people who are older than me, and who have had more life experience than me, and I try to be in the vicinity of those kind of people, right? You know. So I study with a teacher in the United States, and I work intensely on ideas with Alexander Bard, and he's older than me, um, and so I think that's always a process. You should always be sort of looking up to something, rather than just looking in yourself or at yourself, or and that's what the Joker does. He's always looking at himself, and
Well, but then also I think he looks up to that guy who is on the TV.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
I've forgotten his name, but
I'm getting that wrong, actually. Yeah. He does have a model, but his model is, that's a good point, because there's a difference between having somebody you look up to and that inspires you, and someone who you kind of hero worship, right? So I did say that, yes, you should sort of, when you're in you should have these models and stuff like this. But on the other hand, this guy, this talk show host, whatever it's, he's kind of the missing father for this character, right? He's looking for a father, and this kind of person is supposed to fill the gap as his father, and they have a power relationship rather than a generative teacher-student relationship. So it's a relationship probably of power rather than intimacy.
And I think there's something very, not corrupt, but kind of wrong about that relationship. I think there's a sense it's ambiguous what the talk show host is really like, but you do get the sense that maybe he just got Joker on to get a few cheap laughs.
Yeah, well, he doesn't respect a Joker. He just makes fun of him. He's Joker. He ridicules and humiliates this character, and then the character wants to kill his father in the Oedipal sense, right? Yeah.
It's like and he's an empty father in a sense. He's like in the position of being a father, but doesn't actually want to take responsibility for those who look up to him.
Right.
He himself is
an empty father. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And I'm thinking now, there's one of Jordan Hall's pieces. I think it's the Deep Code essays, and he's talking about the breakdown of the era of broadcast media. Broadcast media is unidirectional, and so mimics this sort of teacher-student relationship, but where one person is doing all the talking and the other person is just passive.
Yeah. It's a relationship of authority, and it's a relationship that's asymmetrical. It's not a relationship of growth. It's a relationship of control.
And that plays out in this relationship that Joker has with the talk show host. But in some sense, the fact that he actually rebels against it and takes his agency there is symbolic of the death of that style of media and that way of organizing people in society.
Exactly. That's why this film is so interesting, because it comes in this like in between moment that we've been talking about, right? Where all of these structures, right? I mean, people have been talking about them as, what is it, Plan A or something? Plan A and Plan B. Have you heard that kind of
game
jargon?
A and game B, is it?
Sorry, excuse me. Game A and game B. So game A structures are all falling apart, right? Game A structures are not working. And game B structures, we don't know what they are. They haven't been born yet. So I've been thinking about this. Okay, either you can be a revolutionary, right, and go out on the street and try to tear down game A, yeah. But if you do that, you're still playing game A. You know what I mean? And so that's again the cautionary tale of the Joker. It's like he doesn't create anything. He just has to murder his father, right? He has to murder this figure. So he hasn't, and also, so he has to, he has to. I don't know. This is a very Freudian thing to say, but you kill your father and fuck your mother, right? That's the Freudian thing, yeah. And so that's his strategy, and that's what makes him kind of into this free and demonic character. But the real thing to do is more like the Jordan Peterson thing to do, is find your father at the bottom of the ocean, right? And and let's say find your go beyond your mother and develop a positive relationship with the world, and move out of the house and have a romantic relationship, right? Because I think he's deprived, the Joker, of that. I was talking to Jordan actually about that, and I was talking about he was saying that the young guys out there, right? I was talking about my students, engineers, and kind of geeky type of guys who are, a bit socially awkward, but very clever and intelligent and full of ideas and interesting people. What they need to do is the self-discipline part. And then they have to, and that will help them to get romantic partners, or that will help them in their, and that's actually the basis, right? That's what he's deprived of. He's like this incel sort of character, right? He's deprived of intimacy with a woman in an adult manner. So he remains forever with his mother. And the only way he can get out of that is just to kill this mother image, and without having the proper, let's say, gratitude and taking the transmission the transmission that he needs from his mother and father to move on and create the new world, or move into the new world, or.
Yeah, and then because he lacks that erotic intimacy with another person, it's just it's lacking elsewhere as well.
Exactly. And it's in that and you remember he has this relationship with the woman, and it's kind of it's a complete fantasy, right? He can't really make a connection to somebody, so he has to live in virtual reality all the time, right? He lives in a dream all the time, so he can't get out of the virtuality, the dream, the fantasy, the childish sort of fantasy of his life, and he lives in this world of abstraction and just clowning around and imagining things and watching TV, and there's no bridge for him to the real world, to creating the real world.
And I think it's clever the way the film depicts his relationship, in that it doesn't give you any sense at first that it is imagined, and so you kind of play along with his fairy tale, and then when it shows up that actually it was all a delusion, you're like, oh shit, I was in that too.
It's the delusion of hope and fear, right? The Buddhists say these are the two big delusions, hope and fear, right? Yeah. So he has this hope, and he imagines this thing, but he's not on the ground. He hasn't landed on the ground.
I tell you what I'm thinking now is, I spoke to Zach Stein recently on the podcast. I need to post that episode actually, and we were talking about education, that being his thing, but also about the project of civilization in perpetuity, and the sense of instilling within people and young people, all people, a sense of the necessity to preserve what we have as humanity intergenerationally, and not just it be about you in the here and now.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking again, that project of civilization perpetuity is totally absent from Joker. He was treated, what it seems, fairly shit by his parents. His dad, who knows who his dad is, his mum just kind of embodies the devouring mother, and then he's left with, well, I have no sense of responsibility to this world. I'm just going to create destruction, and that is the child that I shall birth, and it's a child that is doomed to annihilate itself.
Yeah, and it's also the birth of, let's say, Adolf Hitler and Chairman Mao, and all the dictators are failed artists in a sense. They were all poets, and and they bad poets usually. They and then they at one point felt that the world the world was had, they turned against the world, right, and turned towards power and violence. So I think Joker is a good study of also that the early career of Hitler or something like that. The early career of the dictator. And Alexander and me were talking, and he has a great phrase he calls the shadow of the phallus. The phallus would be a constructive principle, right? That you want a constructive, positive principle, to build something beautiful in the world, something like that. And if you don't have the positive phallus, right? If you don't have this, positive fatherly archetype behind you, right, getting your back, then the shadow phallus comes in, okay, and violence, violence becomes that becomes violence, and that becomes power, control, violence, all the totalitarian instincts rise to the surface. So he's because Joker is badly fathered, or he has no particular father, or he has no father principle. It's not just whether you have a father or not, it's whether you have this father principle deep inside you, because you can't blame everything on your own biological father, right? It's more like you need the father lineage and the mother lineage, to be working, to be behind you, right, and to have your back. And when you don't have that, then you get lost in chaos. And you become the chaos monster, or the chaos clown, or the chaos. There's no rules anymore. There's no direction. There's no protocol. There's no. Yeah, and it's meaning again. Okay, it's all about rediscovering meaning. I think.
Yeah, I'm thinking about attention again now, and it's this sense that, given how many different things there are going on in our sensory perceptive field, our minds, all the time, it's like we need to find something that will anchor us. And if you don't have that positive phallus, that positive ordering principle, that I suppose is there to anchor all of the good and the higher possibilities and pull them out, then if that's not there, it seems like the opposite happens, all the negative and the shit, because it's all there inside all of us, or 99% of us.
Yeah, because it's not like Joker is some weird guy out there. Joker is a potential within us, right? Within any guy, any 20-year-old, or I guess what you could have a probably female iteration of Joker, but that would be maybe look a little different. But the monster basically is in all of us. It's there, and you have to watch it, and you have to tame it, and you have to, if you can even use it to sort of, in an alchemic sense, transmute something dark into gold, or.
Yeah, I have this saying, "We are the wolves that came to me once," and it seems to be like it has that meaning. It's like the
Yeah,
wolves, the darkness, the forces that destroy are also there.
yeah, yeah. It's fair. It's they're all there, and we deny that, and we run from that, and we're afraid of that, and we don't want to look at that, and so we kind of cut ourselves in two, and we become sort of schizophrenic. We don't want to look down there, right? We want to live in this platonic, abstract world of things that work and are beautiful, but there's also this need to go into the darkness and meet the monster.
I think that's why Joker made a bunch of people uncomfortable and they didn't like it. It presents that.
Yeah,
Like, it's funny, I saw it and I was like, okay, this is definitely a dark, uncomfortable movie, but it also, I love it. I feel like it's actually showing me something about myself and giving me that warning as to why it is important to
mm-hmm.
to connect to the things we're talking about. But I can only wonder if perhaps there was less familiarity with the darkness, then it just seems like, wow, this is a fucked up movie about a fucked up guy, and there's less of that ability to cross-identify.
Yeah, well, it's true. Yeah, and I was thinking also that the reaction to the movie was either this is a masterpiece or it was this is a piece of shit, right? It's like there were I can't really judge whether it was a masterpiece or not. I think Joaquin's performance was amazing, incredibly consummate, right? He put his whole being into that performance. So just for that alone, I think it was a great film. Um, but I think people were bothered by the ambiguity of it, right? It didn't give you a clear narrative of what is good and what, it didn't you couldn't say, this guy is 100% bad or unjustified in what he did, and you couldn't say that you couldn't say he was a victim 100%, although he definitely was a victim of a lot of abuse. There was just an ambiguity, and in times of chaos and in times where people are confused, they want something clear, and they want a lifeboat, right? And a lifeboat is a kind of easy ideology that that bypasses complexity, so yeah, I think the ideologues just instinctively thought, oh, this is a dangerous film. We need to write and say how bad it is. Uh-huh. And the people who understand art in some deep way understood that this film wasn't, it was something. It had a realism to it. It wasn't a sophomore movie, So and it wasn't obscure enough for maybe the art people either. So it was just ambiguous and ambivalent, and I think good art is a bit ambiguous and ambivalent and takes you in places, takes you a little further than where you want to go, right? It kind of, but without knocking it over, without hammering you with that. It forces you to look at something that's just uncomfortable. I think my feeling when watching the movie was, this is an electric movie. It's very electric. It's very vibrant, but it's very uncomfortable. And I think that's why I liked it, because I think when I'm in a space of discomfort, I think, something's happening here. This is real, right? And when I'm in a space of just, when I'm watching the average superhero movie, I'm bored in 5 minutes because it's all cute, it's all sentimental, maybe it's funny in some kind of not funny way, and so that's just boring, right? Yeah. But you have to maybe have developed a taste for edginess, or want to go in an edgy direction at times, and are capable of seeing beauty and edginess together.
It's like beauty in the ugly rather than it just being in the fairy tale.
Yeah, because there was something of beauty in that character, and something also very repulsive and uncomfortable. There was both, and that's the ambivalent feeling.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. Well, maybe this is a bit of a, what's the word? I don't know the word. You said something about good art, and maybe that's what good art is that it's
Mm-hmm.
ambiguous. And I'm feeling slightly uncomfortable about deciding what is and isn't good art. I think that's an
Mm.
age-old question. But
Oh.
there is, I think, a sense in which we're saturated by superficial art, and I would count most superhero movies among
Mm-hmm.
that. And you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean, it's just you can sit down and you know what's going to happen before it starts and what ends, and maybe you get a few
Yeah.
surprises here and there. But he's the good guy, and he's the bad guy, and then even just in our visual landscape as well, with media saturation, with
Mm-hmm.
advertising, where there's no depth to anything. It's just this, this, this.
Yeah.
Like I
Well,
feel.
I think you can make a distinction on some level, but there's something you're saying that's true, and that is that life is art. Everything is art, right? It's the and art should not be defined as being this or that, or as music or visual or anything. Art should be practically art should art should pervade every domain of our existence, from architecture to cooking to painting to film, everything, right? And what's not art is what is not alive. Maybe I could put it that way. What is not really alive, and what is a cliche, and what is a product, what is just something that is a repetition of some formula, something that's just generated to put us to sleep or to appease us in some kind of a way. And I watch this kind of bad art sometimes. I just because at the end of the day, my brain is tired and I don't want to engage with the world, and so you go into a comfortable cocoon and engage in something meaningless. But on the other hand, even in those things, you might be able to find a little art in there somewhere, right? You might be able to find something, and you might be able to find art in something that's so kitschy and trashy that it you know I almost prefer that sometimes than what's considered to be art, or what the establishment considers to be art, or what crap you find in galleries, or you know
Mm.
or the whole art business, right? Because art and business are not the same. I mean, business could be an art as well, I think, but I don't think art and business. I think instrumentalization of art for money is usually a reduction of art. If that's the purpose, that's the end goal. And so a movie like Joker, obviously the director put something into that was not just about generating making money. But I think there was more to his vision than that, and so.
Mm. I'm thinking of there's a comment that I think Jordan Peterson made in one of his conversations where he's talking about the work of Ayn Rand. I think it's Peterson,
Mm-hmm.
basically
Yeah.
saying it's good, but it's not art because it's ideology.
Right.
And
Yeah.
he contrasts.
Ideology kills art, definitely. Or at least ideas don't kill art. You need ideas in art. You need art. Ideas, philosophy generates art, but fixed, narrow, moralizing ideology is the death of art. It just kills it dead. It's just no longer art, as far as I'm concerned. Right. I mean, perhaps we all have a different definition of what art is, but and I can see that there would be a game A version of art and a game B version of art. And
That's interesting.
the game B version of art would be when art pervades your entire life, right? It's the artfulness of everything you do, which comes back to what you were talking about, I think, in terms of attention. Yeah, because I think that's also what matters in art is attention and ritual and how you organize the world around you, but also your you know yourself. And
Well, now I'm thinking of that distinction. I think is it Buber who talks about I thou and I it, and then art that is ideology or art that is propaganda treats perhaps itself like an it and you like an it. It's like there's a message and it's going from here to here. Whereas art that isn't that can teach, but in a way that feels relational. You're in it and you're a part of it. And it's not so much telling you the things that you don't know, but telling you the things that you do know. And you see it and go, oh yeah.
Yeah. It makes you more intimate with reality. It doesn't push you away from reality or concretize reality or reify reality. It deepens reality. And it makes reality more luminous, and the it is when the it is just is a sort of its total instrumentality it's just a machine, right? And a machine is just runs and runs and runs, and it has no intentionality. It has no. Yeah, I guess art is also related to beauty in some sense. And so we can know what art is by knowing, is this thing fucking ugly, right? This piece of architecture, some of the architecture in the suburbs of Paris they're a level of ugliness that you can't even imagine, right? There's so much ugliness there. And then you're in another part of Paris and you're like, there's this numinosity of, I don't know, intention, maybe, as you say, attention that the people have paid to every stone and every, and then there's the depth of time that has affected that neighborhood, bringing us back to our Heideggerian idea of being in time, right? So time makes something deeper, and the thing that endures, right? All these sort of horrendous architecture and ugliness and stuff, none of that endures in any meaningful way. And I don't know if other art endures, in deep time and the whole total time, but it has an enduring quality.
I do feel like I should add, I feel like there is still a distinction even between ugliness, between like beautiful ugliness and just like ugly ugliness. And what I mean by that is I think there have been some times when art can be so vulgar or abrasive that there is something transcendent about it in itself.
Yeah. But that's the attention you put to it, right? That's the attention you put in. And I think that also has to do with decay. There is a beauty when things start to decay, right? Even if it's kind of ugly, there's a beauty in decay, right? There's a beauty in decay because decay means that life is passing and new life is coming on.
And there's also a beauty in waking up next to your lover when they haven't got their makeup on and their hair's a mess and they're not looking pretty, and you still like, I mean, maybe that's not ugly, but it's not this dressed up glitzy presentation.
Sure, but that is ugly. Dressed up glitzy presentation is often, there's often an ugliness to that, isn't there? I mean, it's because it doesn't breathe, so I think it's a fine line. Yeah, exactly. You can. I'm not saying. Oh, yeah. But I'm not saying. I don't mean beauty necessarily in a sort of aesthetic sense. That there's these models of beauty, and that's what they mean, and that's what they are. Yeah, because it's something. Again, it's something that is a bit ambivalent. What it is. It's not something you want to define in too rigid a category. On any kind of rigid category.
Yeah, like I'm thinking Lacanian terminology, almost like it brings you out of your symbolic and puts you into contact with the real, which by definition is that which can't be symbolized.
There you go. Well, yeah, and but art is also about symbols, but in the sense that a symbol is a compression, I think. I haven't thought through. I think a compression of something which cannot be symbolized in any absolute sense. So you can say that a dog. When you say dog, it's a symbol of a dog. The word dog, but that doesn't capture or contain or say what the dog is. So everything is a sort of everything with language and all that. Art is using symbols to make symbols transparent, perhaps. I don't know if I've got that right, but that's my exploratory definition of symbols at this point.